Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Torrin Minutillo. Torrin is a founder of Attergy Coaching System, but began his entrepreneurial career back in 1989, cutting his teeth in the retail space. The first venture at the tender age of 24 was in the video rental business. Within a few short years, he was part owner of 3 locations, and this was at a time before mobile phones and the instant internet communication. Fast forward to a period of 18 years after starting, buying, and selling 8 different enterprises, Torrin arrived at a career in real estate, establishing his own agency in 2007 that focused on commercial real estate sales, leasing, and property development. At the age of 44, with a young family and business going very well, he ran into the global economic crash of 2008, which almost wiped him out. Upon reflection, he realized he did not deal with crisis very well, but learned some huge lessons. Rather than being a reactive business owner, he began to use his research, observations, and experiences to create different habits, behaviors, and responses. The result was a dramatic increase in success in a new way of doing business using an inner game operating system created from internal strengths. More importantly, this newfound success gave rise to an idea. Torrin is now helping many other business owners discover their own pathway to fulfilling businesses and life through Attergy Coaching System. So please welcome to the show, Torrin Minutillo. Torrin, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, not a problem. And I'm looking forward to hearing more of your adventures and your story. So why don't we dive right into that and let the audience know more about you? How did you get to where you are? We talked about it just briefly there, but let's tell it. Let's hear it from you.
That was a pretty comprehensive intro. So thanks for that. Look, I think probably the way I sort of sum up my business career is that it's actually nearly 33 years now in another month or so. Continuous moving from one business to another, particularly in the first early years. So I look back at my journey now as sort of 2 parts, if you like. It was the part leading up to the global financial crisis, where I was pretty restless in the first 5-10 years of my business journey, looking for the right thing to get my teeth into. And I just had lots of enthusiasm. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I was looking for a place to land. And so I ended up sort of buying and selling and starting and ending quite a few enterprises. I think there's 7 or 8 in those first 18 odd years. But then I landed in real estate in 2000. And while I had a couple other businesses going, I wasn't still sure that real estate was the right thing for me, but I quickly got into that and decided that, once I established myself quite well and did very well in the first 5 or 6 years, eventually set up my own real estate company after I got my license in and all those things that I needed to do. And then sort of global financial crisis in 2008 was probably the deciding time for me, in that everything was going really well. I built up a lot of assets, by lots of measures I was doing well. But that sort of really rocked me on my heels. And I spent sort of 2 to 3 years period from 2008 to 2011, really, trying to figure it all out and weave my way through. And probably on reflection, one of the mistakes I made, I made a lot, but one of them was just trying to hang on too long and was in denial around the fact that this was really going to impact the way it was. So that's sort of like the first half of my business career up to that point. And then probably about, literally 2.5, 3 years in, so 2011, I really started to look for different ways of doing things and trying to figure out, well, if I was going to stay as an entrepreneur and build a business, I needed to find a different way. So that's when I started to look, inwardly to who I was. And so my second half of my business career, which leads me to now, is sort of one of inward growth, which then actually really made my external growth fantastic. What I mean by external growth is all the, the achievement measures that we tend to measure our life by, and what we consider success. And so the biggest lesson out of all of it, as part of the journey to where I am now, was that it wasn't really the global financial crisis that, which is what sort of made things really tough for me, was I wasn't prepared for business life, and I didn't have the stability, didn't really understand where I was at and where I was going. And so I look back at that period now as a pretty much a gift, in that it really made me go back to understand what really matters. And things like, so in the end, I spent the next sort of 4 or 5 years really building up my real estate business and career, and things just, when I started learning more about myself and how I got my results and who I was internally, I was able to sort of see things a lot clearer and make better decisions. And the growth in the next sort of 5 years was nearly 3 times more than what I had before the financial crisis. So about, I suppose 5 years ago now, so it's about 2017, I was in a couple of networking groups, and I got a lot of coaching along the way as well, is that I sort of had an idea, a passion about maybe helping other people through a similar journey, because throughout all my study now, and I've done a lot of human behavior study, psychological study about what makes us all tick, particularly associated with business owners. Studied high performance people, worked out what's the difference between all that. And I sort of got to the place where it's not necessarily about the strategic, tactical things that you do in a business. It's more about how, your inner game, which is what I call the inner game, that helps you thrive. So about 5 years ago, I set upon a task to learn more about coaching and how I could help other business owners. So I've been doing that now officially sort of 4 years, and wrote a book last year, just sort of as a bit of a bring some ideas together.
Yeah. So
that's a very quick snapshot of 32 years. And as I said, you can probably break it up into the first half and the second half.
Well, and that's what's so intriguing, though, is, you go through this stuff, and we all go through stuff, if you will, but you experience it and you learn from it, and you realize the value of who we are inside. I think that's critical, because we have such great value within us, and your story shows that. It took us, sometimes it takes us a little longer to figure that out, but when you realize that value you have, your outward results, you said, are like 5 times what you had before. That's great. I mean, that's just really something.
Yeah. And I think it's the backbone to this is that, we all get conditioned for whatever reason, depending on what your pathway is. And there's a lot that creates your conditioning to how you show up and what you do. But we're conditioned to believe that we need to chase all these external measures, money, whatever it is, everything associated with money, and now all your external things that you're trying to achieve. But I think what I've come to learn and understand through my journey, and at a deeper level, is that if you haven't got your internal stuff right, that's what impacts the external stuff the most. But most business owners will only look at their external achievements, what they're trying to achieve, and they don't look at how they're actually getting those results. And so for me, it's very much a distinction between, outer game, inner game. It's not overcomplicated, this, to actually understand it. It can be complicated to actually do the work, and why don't we get the results we're getting? But to actually understand that your inner game and who you are internally, and we can go into that a bit more if you want, is really what's determining your external results. But the point I'm trying to make here is that most business owners, and I'm talking, 90% plus business owners, will only work on their external stuff, the tactical, strategic, their methods, their models, their systems, their processes, which is what everybody gets to see. So that's why I say it's the outer game. It's what you get to see when you're interacting with a business. But what you don't get to see is the internal structure of that person, their resilience, their belief systems, their value systems, potentially some trauma they might have had that's impacting the way they show up. So their identity, all these things form your inner game, and it can be a bit painful to go into that. So that's why we tend to avoid them as a human condition.
Yeah, financials, I have no feelings, so it doesn't hurt looking at financials and business type stuff. But when you go into your life and your life experiences, those feelings can hurt. So it's interesting you talk about, the inner game operating system.
Yep.
Tell us the operating system. I mean, if you can explain that a little bit, that's interesting.
Okay, so probably the best way for me to explain this is that, there's a human condition. There's us as human beings have pretty much got a system that we operate from the moment we're born, how we evolved as human beings. So I explain that business is an expression of who you are, or business and life, just like health and well-being, relationships, financial things. So actually working as an entrepreneur, as a business, just an expression of who you are.
Right.
So who you are internally, which is your internal operating system, your personality, your character, as I said, your value systems, your belief systems, how, all these things like that. So, the experiences that you've had, your conditioning process, this is all makes up your internal operating system. And this is impacting your actions, your responses, your behaviors to what the external world is seeing. So the stimulus that we get as a business owners, where there's a problem on a day-to-day basis, a big problem, small. So for me, if you take my example, the external of the global financial crisis, my internal operating system, who I was responding to that.
Right.
But because I hadn't done the deep work to understand what makes me thrive and what I was trying to achieve, I was looking external of myself for the answers to try and work my way through the global financial crisis. And what I've learned is whether, plug into your situation, whatever your crisis is or whatever your situation or circumstances, if you're looking external of who you are, you're not going to find those answers. So your internal operating system, to understand what are your value systems. So if I meet a business owner now and I have a conversation with them about, okay, tell me about your value systems, they'll go, I'm not even really sure what my values are, but with a bit of probing, you do get to what the core values that they're operating from. And then when you look at their behavior, they're showing up in what they do, and they may have some belief systems that potentially are limiting them to achieve. They might have some fear around some certain things, which are a reflection of an experience they had 5, 10, 15 years ago. And as an example, a client about a month or so, we were chatting about this. And this guy's got $1 million+ turnover business and doing very well in all measures. But he was scared about, investing in himself moving forward, because 8 to 10 years earlier, he invested $10,000 in the program, which he believed failed. So that was a big deal for him 8 to 10 years ago, which that was almost like a mini trauma for him, which is now showing up in his business decisions 10 years down the track when he's in a completely different situation, right? So he's never dealt with that to understand what actually happened there. Why did he get into that situation? So we can go back now and reframe all that so that he looks at that situation differently, which is now not limiting his beliefs moving forward. So it's, that's the sort of inner work. And so again, the way I categorize it, if you really want to work out how you're getting your external results, you need to go internally to who you are. And there's, there's neuropsychology, there's neurobiology to this. There's a whole lot of deep things. And so the way I explain it, Bob, is that most problems show up in your business as a surface problem, but there's generally 1 or 2 layers below that that's actually the root cause of that problem, which is where the answer to that is.
Okay. It's kind of like asking that question why 5 or 6 times. It's important. You get to the real result of why you want to do something, why you're reacting that way, or why something may be occurring. Now, did your multiple businesses and all that, did that experience educate you? I mean, did you have, you said you got your licensing in real estate and all that. And you've got, I assume you've got coaching certifications, or you studied a lot of that. I mean, plus the life experiences that added to your value, if you will, for your education.
Yeah. So for me, like most people go to university at the start of their life, or the start of their working life, and then they go and experience life. So they get I decided to do it the other way. I went and did the life bit first, and then went to figure out, okay, why does this all happen to me? Which is probably in some ways, I get to understand things a lot quicker, right? Yeah. So because if you're explaining psychological development to an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old who's had limited experience in life, they might get the theory and they might pass the test, but they don't necessarily understand where this is all fit in. But when you're explaining all that stuff to a 55-year-old who's been through 30 years of ups and downs, a lot of these things make sense a lot quicker. Right? Yeah. So that's sort of the interesting thing for me. So so certainly, as I said, the work ethic of a business entrepreneur. I had all that, like I didn't have any issues about doing the hard work and getting involved, but not necessarily the smartest work to get the best results. So, the classic example at the moment, which not one at the moment, a lot of business owners who are maybe listening to this, one of their key problems going to be is they don't have enough hours in the day. They're super busy. Well, that's a focus problem. It's not a I'm a too busy problem. I heard a long time ago that busy is a decision. It's not an outcome. You decide to be busy based on what you choose to do on a day-to-day basis. The point is that if you've got a business that's growing and you're super busy, it means that your focus for what you should be doing is misplaced. And that could be because you've got attachment issues. You don't trust other people to do the work, all these other things that are sitting below. So you go, well, I've got 5 employees, 10 employees, 50 employees, but I'm micromanaging everything because I don't trust them to do what they need to do and give them responsibility and lead them correctly, right? So the surface problem is I just don't have enough hours in the day. I don't know how I'm going to do with these extra things. Well, when you break it down, it's like because they're focused on things they shouldn't be based on the growth of where the business is at. So it's actually a focus problem. It's not a I'm too busy problem. So these are all things that I've learned now, and I coach other people and help them through it to really get down to tell me what your surface problems are, and then we can from there go maybe 1, 2, sometimes 3. As I said, the other example I gave you before, that was a trauma problem.
Right.
That wasn't a tactical, strategic system process problem.
Yeah, that was carrying a lot of extra weight for many years you maybe didn't have to carry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we probably underestimate how much of we do carry that, all of us, even, and developing yourself, personal development, psychological development is all about understanding your inner operating system at a level where you feel secure about who you are, right? Because most of these problems show up as an insecurity because you don't feel safe. That's our basic neurobiology system at work, is to keep us safe.
Right.
That's what our brain is built to do. It works for us until it gives us roadblocks in business or whatever it is we're trying to achieve in life.
Well, let's touch on that for a minute, because that is one of the questions I had for you, was regarding courage and overcoming fear. I mean, obviously that has a tremendous value in growing your business, is because you have to have the courage, 1, to ask for the sale. 2, you got to have the strength to overcome any fear of, they may say this, they may say that, turning all that noise off in your mind. Is that something you help people with as well?
Yeah, totally. So in my my structure, my process, there's three core things that I believe every problem has an origin or a pathway through, and that is focus, which I've already touched on, connection, and courage. So those 3 things. So if you would present to me with where you're at in your business journey, and whatever surface problem showed up, I would filter it through one of those 3 things. Is it a focus problem that's causing you not to get you? Is it a connection problem? Connection with yourself, connection with your market, connection with the people around you, connection? Or is it a courage problem that there is some fears that are blocking you from moving forward? So every situation, I haven't come across something that I haven't been able to filter through one of those 3 things. And sometimes it's a combination of 2 or potentially all 3 of those things, depending on, some people reach some glass ceilings and they can't seem to break through, but they are. So courage forms a big part of that. So there's 2 parts to sort of courage. Courage is having that fear to break through a potential, like something that is blocking your way, and we think of courage as doing something courageous, maybe a physical danger that you're breaking through, you're paddling down a rapids, you're going over things. So that's going to take some courage to do that. Potentially if you want to jump out an aeroplane with a parachute, you're breaking through some courage barrier. And that's how we tend to understand courage quite well. But courage is also displayed literally on a day-to-day basis on our behaviors and how we show up in our world. And there's a great quote, I think it's C.H. Lewis, was that, courage is merely not a virtue, but it's the testing point of every virtue at its testing point. So in other words, every value that you have, when you come up to a testing point, am I going to push that through? You need courage to push through, because you're always going to get challenged on your value systems. You know, if honesty is one of your values, there's going to be times when you go, a little white lie might be okay, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. So, you know, one person's honesty value is different to another person's honesty value. The testing point of that value is having the courage to stick to who you really are, as opposed to getting off track. So these show up in behaviors. And so one of the great studies was done by a psychologist called David Hawkins. He published all in a book called The Power versus Force, where he rates all sorts of different behaviors on a calibration from 0 up to 1,000, and 0 being sort of shame and guilt, and 1,000 being loving and enlightenment. And courage sits at you know, if you calibrate 0 to 1,000, sits at around about on his study, and he did a 30-year study about human behavior and how this all impacts what we're trying to achieve and how it empowers our life and disempowers. So courage sits at a calibration of, say, 200 in the scale. So there's a whole lot of behaviors that sit below that line, and then there's a whole lot of behaviors that sit above that line. So what I've used is this model implemented into my coaching system, is that we identify with people, what are these behaviors that you are showing up on a day-to-day basis that sit below the line of courage, and what are the ones that you want to be doing that are above? Now, in this study, David figured out over a 30-year period that 85% of the world's population consistently live below the line of courage in their behaviors. Wow. And some of these behaviors are things like, you know, being vindictive, complaining, blaming other people for your situation or circumstances, you know, being a victim, potentially, you know, feeling guilt or putting shame on other people. So all these things show up on a day-to-day basis, and we all experience this, you know, on a regular basis. Above the line of courage is an example of things like, you know, empathetic behavior, forgiveness, trusting, accepting where you are, taking responsibility. So you can see that these behaviors take a little level of courage to actually do on a day-to-day basis. So courage forms a big part of who you are on a day-to-day basis. And this is very much in a game operating system.
Right.
Most of this, what you forgot to mention before, is most of the inner game operating system is subconscious or unconscious. You're not even realizing how you're behaving and showing up, right? Which is why we don't tend to take a notice of it a lot. But the growth in the person's inner game is about paying attention to that, and how is that impacting what you're doing, which is affecting the results you're trying to achieve, i.e. grow a business, make more money, you know, build a brand, whatever it is, right? So the work that I do is alongside business owners as in the leadership perspective to go as a leader. So my view, Bob, is that until you start leading a team, you need to lead yourself. You need to understand how to lead yourself, right? And whereas most leaders that are thrust into a position of leadership, they spend all their time trying to figure everybody else out and how to make them tick, but they don't do any work on themselves, right? So there's no coincidence that they don't get the results they want because they don't know who they are themselves, let alone trying to help someone else grow. So the best leaders are the ones that have done all that inner work and really understand themselves, because then they start to understand the patterns of the people around them and then can help them through their struggles to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of letting you know about where courage fits into all this, which is pivotal and very, very super important. And I use it as a bit of a diagnostic tool to say to people, well, tell me where you sit in all this. You know, what are the behaviors? Are you complaining a lot? Are you not taking responsibility? Are you empathetic? Are you compassionate? Or are you, you know, sort of consistently blaming and guilting and shaming people to try and do things, you know, and the patterns, once you start bringing awareness to this, you know, people start to understand where they sit within it, because it's not a difficult model to understand.
It's not difficult to understand. It might be difficult to swallow, but you know, some of those things, you're talking.
That comes to accepting.
Yeah, exactly.
That comes to accepting. So accepting is actually one of the lines above, one of the behaviors above the line of courage, which, you know,
that's why people are below courage. Yeah,
correct. Yeah. And look, and you know, a couple of little takeaways from that is that I'm not saying that you need, you know, and certainly David in his book wasn't saying that you need to be 100% of the time above, right? That's probably not sustainable, because we all shift and forward. The point is being aware that when you are below the line of courage for a period of 10 minutes, an hour, that you catch yourself out, you go, okay, I need to change this behavior because this is not empowering me. Because remembering, if you're consistently below the line of courage, it's disempowering you from where you want to go. And if you're consistently above, it's empowering you. And what happens is you create energy around that attracts more of that into it. So if you're consistently above, people around you are going to notice this. You're going to create energy that attracts people towards you that want to work with you, versus when you're creating that energy below, where you're blaming, you're complaining, and you're shaming everybody, you're vindictive, you're antagonistic, you're getting a lot of anxiety, you're fearful, you're going to attract more of that, and you're going to push people away. So you can see why it's disempowering. So it doesn't take a long time to explain to people why this is important and how to pay attention to it. And in my coaching groups and programs, we talk a lot about this.
So belief systems, I think that it sounds like those are critical to your growth. You have to look at your belief system, your current belief systems. If you want to change it, how are you going to change it? Are you willing to change it? You help them look at all that so they can grow.
Yeah. So I think, I've followed many authors and, read lots of different books. And one thing that stands out to me around belief systems is Stan Beecham, who wrote a book called Elite Minds, US guy. I think he's actually from your neck of the woods around Florida. And he talks about belief systems in this way, and that is that there's not too many things that are true to what we hold, right? So most of the things that we believe to be true, right or wrong, are a belief system that we've created over a period of time that we've conditioned ourselves. So when you think about the beliefs that you hold through that, viewpoint, if you like, or is that, okay, you need to start questioning, why do I believe a certain thing? Why do I believe I can't achieve this? Why do I believe we're stuck at this? So it's often a belief system that's been created potentially through your own conditioning, your own experience. I mentioned a good example earlier where a situation that happened with someone 8 to 10 years ago has created a belief system, which is now holding him back, is that he's fearful of making investment in himself. Right. So that's a belief system. It was neither right or wrong. It was just a belief system that was created for that individual based on their journey. Another thing about belief systems is to question, is it actually your belief or is it someone else's belief that you've adopted?
Yeah. You see that all the time in the news stories. Do your own research. Listen to both sides. You can't just take it one side and look at all the facts. That's a good point. We got to be reminded of that.
And there's something that I've been working with some people just, very recently is like, how do belief systems tend to form? And it's through assumptions. So one of the key things in the game that we look at is that the amount of assumptions that we make on our business development journey. And this is life in general, but I'm talking it through the expression in how it shows up in business, is that the assumptions that we make on a day-to-day basis, and there's a neurobiology around this, is because our brain is built to make assumptions because it's a very efficient way for us to navigate our way through life, right? Because if you had to stop and think about everything you did on a day-to-day basis, you'd be exhausted by 8 a.m., right? So your neurobiology, your emotional, how you feel about things, will automatically make an assumption about what you should and shouldn't do because it's an efficient way. And often it's going to, your belief systems, your experiences, your conditioning, because that's an efficient way. You don't have to engage your higher order brain, which is quite energy sapping. That's why most of the population only engage their higher order brain potentially 5% of the day. Wow. High performance people go to 10 to 12%, elite, masters of their craft, potentially 20%. And if you're world class, like if you're Michael Phelps, who's probably the greatest athlete ever, he would have had to been thinking about that consistently at about 40% of his day. He had to engage in everything he was doing from the moment he woke up to the moment he went, to be able to be at that high performance level, right? But us mere mortals, we start off at around about 5%. So the point with that is that it creates a system within you. This is that operating system of just creating assumptions. Okay. So you just assume that things are going to work out, and it can work against you as well. It can work certainly for you because, you don't have to stop and think about how do I tie my shoelaces up or how do I brush my teeth, and because all that. But when it comes to the strategy that I'm putting in place to try and, attract customers, service them, all the rest of it. You make a lot of assumptions on how that's all going to roll out. And then what happens is you get 6 to maybe potentially 3 to 6 months down the track, and you realize the assumptions that you made are not working for you, and you don't have a plan B or a plan C. So what I try to do is to tell people, okay, these results that you're getting are based on some assumptions that you made, down the track, say 3-6 months ago, that are not showing up. What was the parallel planning that went with it? Well, what's parallel planning? It's like, so, it's, the point is this, Bob, is that your inner game is already creating your results.
Right.
Okay. That's the thing, right? So at the moment, your external results are being created by how your internal operating system is working. What I'm expressing to my clients and anybody who wants to listen to how I've evolved this is that you need to pay attention to that so that you can then have a chance of changing things to get what it is externally that you're chasing. That's, in layman's terms, as best I can explain. I mean, I do go into neurobiology and neuropsychology and how that all impacts you to get what you want. But in layman's terms, and the easy pathways to understand, your personal leadership is about connecting your inner game to your external outer game, and all those tactical, strategic systems and process methods, your vision, your goals that you're trying to achieve. That's all external of who you are.
Right.
You're expressing that in a logical, systematic way, but your internal operating system is, running on emotion, feeling, all these other things. Logical plays a small part in it.
Yeah. And that's a hard one to help people realize, is that, we're more emotional than we want to be sometimes. And you got to balance that. And I think you described that pretty well.
So I think, there's a method I take people through. So it might be helpful for people just to have a think about this. It's the framework of 5 A's. So the first A is awareness. So the first A is awareness. You need to have awareness around this stuff, when you've already touched on that. The second A is acceptance. Until you accept that these internal beliefs or value systems are, so in other words, yep, I can see that this is causing me to have this result, right? So that's the second A is acceptance. And then the third A is action. There's no point taking any action on anything until you're aware of what the problem is and accepting that it is a problem, because you'll never make the change that's required unless you actually accept that this is holding me back. Because what will happen is your conditioning is too strong and it'll take you back to where you were.
Right. That comfort level.
Yeah. Okay. So then once you work out what are the actions that you need to take, the fourth A is assistance. You need some sort of help alongside, whether it's coaching or whether it's learning, or have an accountability partner, people within your organization, someone to help you. And it could be, just going and doing a course or reading a book about this or this particular problem. So if you've got struggles around your own beliefs, well, then go and figure out, why are beliefs so strong with me? How did I get to where I got to, right? So whether you pay for coaching to help you through that, or whether you said you do study around that, your choice. But I believe you need some sort of assistance. And then the fifth A is assessment. So the action that I've taken based on my awareness and my acceptance, how do I measure whether I'm moving forward or back? That assessment will create a new awareness, and then you take through this cycle again. So that a new awareness, you go, okay, I accept that. That's either working or not working for me. What's the action I need to take? What's the assistance? How do I assess that? And so it's a framework of 5 A's, which is very useful in helping people move forward from where they are. And to understanding all this, that there's probably an emotional driver underneath all that, that's causing their blockages or their things. So I mean, today has been a great conversation in understanding, or hopefully if people understand, is how this inner game operating system is really impacting everything they're trying to achieve external of who they are, and so there's, and I do go into, well, what are the things that you're trying to achieve externally? Let's start there, and then reverse engineer to why.
Reverse engineer. Okay. Yeah. Wow. And that's a great reminder for people. Well, that's a lot of information, and I'm sure there's a lot more, Torrin, but why don't we tell people where they can get a hold of you, how they can get your website, what can they find there? Because that's important. We want to make sure people know you're there and get more information if they want to get in contact with you.
Excellent. Thanks, Bob. So I have written a book called The Essential Inner Game, which was published, I think, and it's just 10 guiding principles that will help you with your inner game, right? So it's really a starting point to say, okay, there's 10 principles now, and I go and explain them with a little bit of depth. It's not a big book. It's only about 130 odd pages. So if you go to my website, attergy.com, so ATTERGY.com, you'll see that you can get a complimentary copy of my book there. It's a real book. It's not a PDF. I'll put it in the post, send it to you. And that's just really my way of spreading the word, meeting some people, having some conversations, helping them through potentially just initial call things, no commitment. I don't ever have an agenda of expecting anybody to be a client. I'm really my bread and butter is my real estate company. That's where I'm making money. I'm still running that in the background. We have a nice team there. We're doing very well. Things are good. This work that I'm doing as a business coach, and it's evolving all the time, is really a bit of a side gig for me, to be fair. But it's now get to the point where I'm getting busy again. Go back to busy as a decision, and then I need to start figuring out how to better manage this. So anyway, so that's where people can find me. Attergy.com. Attergy is a made-up word of attitude and energy. So I believe they're the foundational blocks of doing anything. So that's how I named that. But I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So Torrin Minutillo. If you just search me on LinkedIn, I'm posting stuff there, having conversations. Reach out. With the advent of Zoom, I can have conversations with anybody on any corner of the planet.
Isn't this cool?
And I just love meeting good business owners who are trying to achieve something, something I might say in a conversation like today. That's why the podcast is a good opportunity. It might just spark someone to think differently about their business journey. And that's really what it's about, bring awareness. And then from there, until people, challenge their own ways of doing things, they're never going to evolve to someone different. So this is very much a personal development journey. But as I said, business is just an expression of that. And, because it's the biggest arena of our life, potentially 40, 50 hours. And then if you're an entrepreneur and you're spending 40 or 50 hours a week working in your business, you're probably spending another 20 or 30 hours outside of your business thinking about your business. So, you could be spending 80 hours of your life thinking about business. There's nothing else you do in your life that you spend that amount of time focusing on.
Right. That's very true.
So what happens is your identity gets tied to that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
You need to separate that thing. So that's how people can connect with me. I'd love to talk to some people. So reach out and say hello.
Great. And we will make sure we post that in the show notes, Torrin. I want to thank you for taking the time. I know it's early for you there in Australia. So thank you for taking the time today to be a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the insight and what you're offering people with the awareness, acceptance, action, assistance, and assessment. I mean, let's look at that, people. Take a peek at what he's got. Check out his website, and so we can, grow ourselves. That's important. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Excellent, Bob. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks very much.
Thank you.